we've all said it, right? I never win my flips. Then who the fuck wins the flips if we all don't win them? I don't understand.
Hey YouTube, what's up? Alec Torelli here. I'm excited to bring you today's guest, Joseph, a client of mine. We have worked together over the years, and I'm excited to unpack some of his recent success in tournaments, as well as cash games, and some practical adjustments that you guys can make when switching between the formats, how to lower variance, and one of the questions I get asked the most, how do you get past those mid stages of the tournaments? Joseph, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Alec, how's it going, man? Good to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for taking the time. So I wanted to start with something that I know a lot of people ask about, which is lowering variance in poker. It's really the enemy of the professional or someone that's trying to win or make poker work, because it's just so frustrating mentally to lose for long periods. And on the bankroll too, it takes a toll, and then that sort of spirals, causing people to play worse because they're losing, and then it just sort of derails from there. So, what are some of the adjustments? There are things we can do though to lower the variance. I mean, you can't eliminate it, but you could definitely keep the odds in your favor. So, what are some of the adjustments you've made on this front that have helped you that other people can adjust as well?
So yeah, just like what you touched on, mate, with the variance, the tricky part about it is if you're trying to do poker as either a side hustle or a consistent income, what you're trying to look for in a way or another is that bit of consistency. If you're looking for that income, but on the flip side, with poker comes variance. Therefore, you eliminate the consistency. So I think a couple of things that we worked on together that made a lot of a difference was one of them mindset. I started looking at my poker sample size at something a lot larger than 500 hands or 1,000 hands or 2,000 hands, and tried to mentally just stick with the fact that the EV of the decisions is correct, but the standard deviation of things is going the other way. So that was one of the things that made me able to remain calm and in control of the situation. But the bigger adjustment was the in-game adjustments that we have done together. So things like marginal hands that play well post-flop, but not necessarily from early positions. Things like suited connectors or in a 9-way cash game, or hands like that. As I started eliminating those, which hurt for the first while when I looked at 8-7 or hearts under the gun and just open folded those in a 9-handed poker game. Took a bit of time to get used to, but honestly, just the outcome that came with that was amazing, and I could just immediately see the difference in the way standard deviation was going and variance was going. So that was probably one of the main or immediate things that you can apply in game. Position is the biggest one. The more I'm playing pots in position, the less the variance was. That's kind of one of the biggest takeaways that I've taken. So I eliminated a lot of my range from earlier position. I'm playing a lot more from late and in position. This was one of the main things that has made much of a difference. And once that has happened, it just makes you a lot more comfortable playing your game after then. So you're not making as many mistakes as you would when you're actually running up against variance. So
yeah, I think these things sort of snowball. Like it's really painful to do in the beginning. You touched on that, but I think it's super important. Just the biggest mistake I think I see people make is playing too many hands, and they typically do that from earlier or middle positions, which are the most disadvantageous situations to play those hands. So those mistakes compound. They end up with more bluffs post-flop than they should have. They overcompensate by bluffing too frequently, which exacerbates the problem because the pot sizes get bigger, and a 1 or 2 big blind mistake pre-flop turns into this huge pot that you didn't have to play, and you lose 50 big blinds. So if you just cut out those situations in early position and mid position especially, it does make a huge difference, and it takes some getting used to. It's a little bit more. You have to be more patient. It's a little bit more boring. You're less stimulated, but ultimately, I think it's easier long term because your mental state is more stable because you're winning more frequently, and that's really the end.
those wins give you that stimulant that you're looking for. Trust me. After you look at those winning sessions and you look at it for a while, and you're just so comfortable and confident about a consistent, solid result, rather than the swings of the variance. That's a lot more stimulating than anything else that can come with it. Now, as you said, also, when you they compound so much in a way that you can't even keep track of, because it begins with a simple part that you either defend the street or two, but you do that over 10 times in a session, and at the end of the day, look at that, and those 10 spots ended up being like 50 big lines. So it's just so compound. So that's the thing, when you look at these spots and you're like, oh, but it was just 4 big lines, but this is happening over a period of time, so it's compounding so much over the month. If you're trying to be a poker player who's relying on an income, you gotta look for these minor adjustments. So that was one of the biggest things, that did really well. The other thing is, when you're getting involved in these spots from early or middle position, you kind of find yourself in multi-way pots, and again, with these types of hands that are suited, connected, or whatever else, they're very drawy. So when you're in a multi-way pot, those draws become a little bit more costly. You feel like you might have to check raise sometimes. You're either raising in positions that you wouldn't otherwise. So they compound so quickly and so much. But yeah, these have been fantastic. These have been fantastic for variance.
Yeah, and I just wanted to accentuate why that happens. I think the minor adjustments are actually the most important because they happen the most frequently. So a lot of people are focused on these big spots, and they're important to play the big spots correct, but a lot of times the big spots play themselves. And I know I'm trivializing this and making it more simple than it actually is, but a lot of times people send me hands and they're like, well, what should I have done here? I had top set and he had a straight draw and a flush draw, and we got it all in. And it's like, the hand plays itself. And yes, it's a big pot, so it stands out more in your mind because you lost a big pot or got unlucky with a strong hand. But what actually matters is the small adjustments and the small plays, because these are the situations where you're running that simulation hundreds or thousands of times over the month. I mean, you're in pre-flop or mid-position deciding whether to open or not hundreds of times, thousands of times.
Yeah.
If you make that decision correct every time, it's sort of tantamount in sports to having good fundamentals or good footwork. It's like the most important thing, because it's the decision that underpins all of the other decisions that are made. And I think traditional like poker strategy review, coaching, training is to look at these, hey, send me 3 hands and we'll talk about those. But if you notice what we did together, and what I think is really important, is to look at the spots that people aren't looking at. Like an athlete would watch the tape, and they don't only watch the big plays where there was an interception or something like that. They watch all of the plays, even when they ran the ball 3 yards in a football game, or they inbound the ball in basketball, or they shoot a layup, or they're boxing out. They're focused on these little tiny adjustments, because that's what compounds over time, and that's what wins the game. And it's the same in poker. So I think it's just so important. And it's less sexy for sure, but it's where the results happen.
I think, I really can't touch on this enough, but, we've been working together for years, and then, we've done a lot of these, traditional spots where we talk about, the big spots that kind of, as you said, play themselves. But when you find yourself in a pot where you got set versus a straight draw, that happens, whatever, twice in 1,000 hands, as for example's sake. But when we're talking about these minor adjustments, they're just happening every orbit. And they just compound so quickly. So one of the biggest things that, I give credit to you, of course, was the fact that we went and say, well, hold on a bit. How about we actually look at a full session, including the hands that you fold, including the hands that you limp, check fold, whatever else. Because these were the spots where we have been able to find so much win and so much gains in. So yeah, this has been one of the most important things I think that we've done together, and definitely exactly like you described it, watching tape, looking for pausing, looking for what did this defender do here, or how did they react to whatever, just these little things. These are the things that actually make the biggest difference, because once you get to a level where everybody knows the game and everybody knows what's going on, there's not much to be discussed about, those major spots that kind of play themselves. If you take a wide open 3-pointer shot in a fucking NBA game, then great, you've done it. But this is not what you're looking for in tape. So this has been just tremendous. It has been tremendous.
That's awesome. And one thing I just would like to get, I think, have a perspective on is just that this is an adjustment. And so there's going to be a period of unknown and perhaps discomfort, and it's going to be a little bit challenging as you are switching things up. So for example, if you want to get in better shape and you're switching your diet and you're like, okay, I'm going to eat healthier now. There's that period where you're like, what do I eat? And you have withdrawals from the sugar or the caffeine.
You have that burger
or whatever.
at night, or
Sorry?
You have that burger at night, just like I played 7-8 suited when we first started talking together from under the gun. You do that once. You do that once in a while. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you're still going to do it. Sometimes you're going to look down at the 7-8 and you're like, you know what? I'm doing it. You're having your cheesecake.
Fuck
Fine.
it. Nine way. This is going in. Let's go.
Right.
You get 3-bet all of a sudden, you're calling, and then you're stuck in something that you don't want to be in. So that's massive, mate. Like, when you as you described it, when you're looking at similarly to a diet, I had a period where it wasn't easy. Sometimes I couldn't do it. Might have been after a little tilty hand where you just fall victim to it. So you have that withdrawal. You do that mistake. You do that correction. But the most important thing is, and I think if there's one takeaway that I can get people to have today, is trust the process and trust the numbers and trust your game plan. Just trust your strategy, because once you do, it just becomes so much easier to implement, because okay, you know what, I got a good game plan, I got a good strategy, I trust it, and I'm just going to execute it. So the execution becomes so much easier. If you're still unsure whether or not it's profitable to play 7-8 suited from under the gun, and you still want to give it a go every now and again, you're just going to keep falling victim for it. So whoever you're working with, whoever coach or whoever you're going to be working with, or tools that you're going to be simulating, or anything that you're going to be working with, just trust that this is right. Whatever is right for you, trust that this is right, and the implementation part becomes so much easier. You're going to have withdrawals, you're going to do a mistake, you're going to do things that you weren't supposed to be doing, or you didn't come in planning to do, but it's just about, okay, dust it off. With time, you're definitely it's just going to become automatic. With time, it becomes automatic for sure.
Yeah, it's like building a new habit. I mean, or making any adjustment, like like we said, diet or exercise or learning a language. I mean, these processes largely suck in the beginning because you're spending all this effort and time and you don't know what you're doing and it's challenging. But the moment you see results, it just becomes addicting. And then you form a habit around that because there's that positive reinforcement, because you're seeing that you feel better, or you're losing weight, or you look better, or you're starting to learn that language, or you're picking up this skill, and then it becomes addicting. Then you form a habit, and then it just becomes part of you. So it's just, I just want to challenge people that when you're going through this process, like you said, stick with your game plan. I mean, the first part is having a winning game plan. So, okay, you do your homework, study, go through the numbers, run the equities, do your homework, create a winning game plan. And then just trust that it's going to take 2, 3, 4 weeks to see results, and just stick with it. Just bear the burden of getting through that hump. And then once you see those results, it just snowballs and then it becomes easy. So this is great. And I hope I know there's some takeaways here that people are going to implement. So thank you for that. I wanted to talk to you also about tournaments and cash games. First of all, you had an amazing result in a tournament recently. So I want you to share about that. But I know you were mainly playing cash games, and then this year we decided to transition to really try and have you focus on tournaments, which was a bucket list item of yours. And I know that a lot of people typically specialize in one format of poker, but you've managed to have success at high levels in both. So what are some of the adjustments that you need to make when switching from one format to another? And what are some of the distinctions between tournaments and cash games that you've found that have helped you succeed in both formats?
Massive, mate. So a few things to be said here. So absolutely, I spoke to you late last year. I said, Alec, I have a goal this year. I want a final table in MTT. So we started working on that. We had that, very good plan and a good schedule to go and play some of the the busiest schedules and the events around the world. And COVID happened, so we're like, okay, that's not gonna happen. But I was lucky enough to be able to still manage to get my part in an MTT. Great result. Ended up with a 18 buy-in win in that MTT, so that was fantastic. Now, the differences between Tournament Joseph and Cash Game Joseph is just, it's like night and day. I mean, I was playing with some of the individuals that played, they have played with me in Cash Games, and they just kept joking about, oh, we don't recognize you. Is this the same person? And that was the biggest fucking compliment, because you know what, they're not the same. It's like, I always say this when people ask me about it, it's like saying, Aussie rules or footy versus NFL football. This is to me what tournament poker and cash game is about. Same game, same ball to an extent, but it's just so much different. So the adjustments that you have to make are completely different. Whatever game plan you have for cash game is completely different to the one that you have for tournament poker. Whatever ranges you have constructed for yourself and have chosen to trust for positions in cash games are completely different to what you're going to go into tournament doing. So I think if you want to try and dabble in both, you want to be able to, if you're not someone who meditates, definitely meditate for a long hour, forget what you've been doing before, and then transition into that new process, and then decide what you're going to do, trust it, and go in and implement. So, you're going to have to reconstruct a whole different variety of ranges. You're going to have to just play a completely different type of poker, and it's tournament poker, which is completely different than cash games. Again, to me, the best way I've always described it, it's like NFL versus AFL, Aussie rules or versus American football. So, yeah, totally different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I always challenge people to focus on one and get good at one first and really understand the nuances of that game and kind of progress to a level of proficiency at that, and then learn the other one. Because once you have a foundation at poker and you're generally good at thinking about the game of poker, you can apply some of that to another format of poker. But it's sort of like learning an instrument. You have to get really good at one instrument, and then because you're a good musician, you can learn another one. Or because you've learned a language like Italian, it might be easier to speak French or Spanish. But it's sort of like that. You have to get really good at one first. So I generally challenge people to pick and be like, specialize in one, like what you did. You were focused on cash games, and we were focused on cash games together for at least a year, and you long before that. And then you're like, look, I got where I wanted in cash games. I'm going to take a year now, and my focus for this year is going to be tournaments. In fact, the post I did, how to plan out your poker calendar for the year, that was based on our time together. So people could check that out about the plan we did for your poker calendar. And then you were going to layer in cash games in between, but it was like, my main focus for the year is going to be tournaments. So when I have a decision between one or the other, I'm going to play tournaments. And then typically at a tournament, you're not going to play cash games while you're playing the tournament, because transitioning back and forth on a daily basis between the strategies is more confusing than it is helpful.
Yeah. Physically, I couldn't. I would not be able to do that physically. The transition from tournament to cash game on the same day. I would even go as far as the next day, but that's just me. Some people can do it, I guess. But I need that, what I call third space. Just you do your tournament sprint, you get into that third space, you reset, and then you readjust back into cash game. So luckily enough, we're still able to, we didn't put in as many volumes as we should have, but luckily enough, we managed to get the result that we wanted, which was fantastic. So that was good to see in tournament.
Yeah, definitely. I think I liken it, you use the football analogy, I liken it to tennis, where there's like, the same athlete will play a season on hard court, and then they'll play on clay court, and then they'll play on grass court. Because it's so different. And it's like, imagine that athlete competing on clay one day, and then the next day he's competing on grass with no time to practice grass or no time to practice hard court. And then he's just going back and forth. And people try and do that and expect themselves to perform at their best across these two things when other competitive athletes aren't doing that. And I think it's very much the same in poker. It is the same game. There are the same rules, but it's a completely different strategy. And I think in tournaments, I would wonder if you agree, you have to be a lot more aggressive, but selectively aggressive. And your hand matters a lot less than the situation. Whereas in cash games, it's really just about your range and your equity, because there is no forced action. So every single situation is the same. It's like in a vacuum, because you're basically just saying, okay, I'm going to run this situation a million times, and there's no reason to ever deviate or change my strategy in the sense of which hands to play in which spots. But in a tournament, there's so many factors that are affecting whether or not you're going to raise. Like if your stack size is bigger than the other players and you're on the bubble, you might raise with any 2 cards on the button. And if it's the opposite, you might be folding way more than you normally would, because you don't want to get 3-bet and be forced to fold because of ICM. So it's just so different in tournaments that every situation is so much more nuanced. Is that what you're finding as well in your adjustments?
Yeah, absolutely. So with cash games, you kind of go and you have that game plan, and you just go and you implement it, because guess what? If it doesn't get working to your favor this time, you can just buy in some more and just keep playing that cash game for as long as you want, and you just keep doing the same thing from the same position, against the same rangers, etc. But when you get tournament into the mix, it's just there are so many different variables. ICM, who's playing, how much does this tournament mean to them? How much does this particular chip mean to them? How attached are they to this pot? What's the next blind level? What's that going to take their big blinds into? You're just thinking about so many different things. So I couldn't agree more about tournament. And then that's where you have to definitely, up the aggression, but selectively, because, tournaments are like a minefield. So you're trying to navigate so many, different playing styles. But aggression is a very good one to navigate most of them. So if you're able to identify where aggression needs to be implemented in 90% of the situations, and understand and be content enough and disciplined enough and poker mature enough to walk away from the 10% where you let go of this particular aggression spot, I think this is a big thing in tournaments.
Yeah. It's first identifying it, and then it's having the patience to do that. And I think the mindset of just navigating a tournament like you're, a strong visual would just be like literally, an army man walking through an unknown desert and just trying not to step on a landmine. And just like, that's really what you're trying to do. You're looking at every spot, and you're just trying to avoid all of this disaster and letting other people, make mistakes and make aggressive plays. And then, you're patient, and then you strike really hard and you pick up a bunch of chips, or you win a pot or two that's like, you could slip under the radar, and you try and do that without showdown, because you really want to lower your variance, because you only have one bullet in the tank. So
I mean, look, one thing in tournament that I can say: if you're not all in, you cannot bust. So the best way you want to try and navigate tournaments is don't be all in. Try and win a lot of pots on second street. Rarely try and get the showdown. You don't really need to. You don't really need to play these massive, huge pots. These chips mean so much, and you don't need that much of an abundance of them for you to be able to navigate through a tournament. Because in a tournament, I think one of the biggest mental adjustments was if I sit down at a tournament and it's 12 midday, I tell myself, okay, Joseph, you're here until midnight. So I'm not sat there and sort of on a boiler, just feeling like, fuck, it's 3 hours into the tournament, like, something needs to happen. Or no, you're here for a very long time. You're here for many levels, which is, an immediate edge that you can get over, a lot of players who feel like the necessity to, even as extreme as doubling up right away. So, pick off these spots. In tournaments, people tend to play a little bit more passive. They try to, pick better spots, most of the time. So if you really, put them to the test, they will most of the time try to assess whether or not this is the best spot that they're going to find in that tournament or not. And a lot of the time, they're going to get their assessment wrong. So, yeah, it would be probably one of the biggest things that I think someone could do immediately is, once you sit down, just tell yourself, whatever it is the time now, I'm here for the next 12 hours. By midnight tonight, I'm gonna still be here. So it gives you that comfort to implement your strategy without any sort of interference.
It's really a marathon, not a sprint. I remember watching the World Series when I was coming up. I believe I was 16, and it was first on TV in 2005. And I don't remember if might have been Marcel Lusk, and he was famous for wearing a suit all the time to play poker.
Yeah.
And they commentators, I think it was him. I could be getting the wrong person, but they were saying how it was a 7-day tournament, and he brought 7 different suits to the tournament because he planned on being there for 7 days. And I was just like, it's so interesting. And it was such a big takeaway for me, because there's only 9 people that make the final table, and there's 2,000 people that enter, and this guy's bringing 7 suits. And I'm like, why, like, how else can you prepare? It doesn't even make sense to do anything else. Like, why would you plan? Yeah. I know people that sometimes go to a tournament and they're like, they go to a tournament like the main event or whatever, and they're like, oh, I only booked a hotel for like 3 nights, or I have a flight back on day 2, and I'll cancel it if I make day 2. And it's like, you've planned ahead to bust, and then you're replanning if you don't bust. I'd rather plan to make the final table and then replan if I don't. And that's just, it's a subtle difference, but it's really a profound difference in like how you operate on a macro level and a micro level, because people go there and they're like, they don't plan to be there till midnight, or they don't plan to be there for 7 days or whatever it is. And it's like, it's so much difference in doing that. So some people are like, oh, I'm going to play, they go to a series of tournaments and they're like, oh, there's 4 different events. I'm going to play the first one. And then they're like sort of already planning on playing the second one, because the only way they wouldn't play the second one is if they weren't at the final table. So they've like planned their buy-ins around that, and their like mental state around being in the second tournament. And then they're like wondering what's happening in the second one when they're still in the first one. And there's so much of that going on that it's like, how can you be singularly focused on the event at hand? And I think that's such a good point. I think the other thing to mention in tournaments is just that I was reading people talk about this very frequently, and like almost always when someone wins a tournament, they talk about their history of that tournament. I mean, unless it's like a single day or a turbo or something like that. But if you talk about someone that wins a 5-day tournament, there's almost always a point where they are like under 20 big blinds, maybe even under 15 big blinds. I wonder what the average is, but I would say like 90% are going to be below 20 big blinds at some point in the tournament, even though the average might be 30 or 40 big blinds. And it's just preparing mentally for that you don't have to make a move right away. You're going to be there till midnight. You're going to be there for midnight 5 days in a row or 3 days in a row or whatever it is. And you have to also prepare. There is going to be a time where you're going to be short, and you're going to have to be patient, and you're going to have to wait for that one spot. And that's something to build into your mindset ahead of time as well, because preparing for these things just make you better to handle them when they come. So you're not feeling that impulse or that rush. Like you said, oh, it's been 3 hours since I played a hand, I have to do something. It's like, no, I only have to win a few pots. I only have to win 2 or 3 pots an hour. And then I could wait for that 1 or 2 big moments of the day where I flop a set and someone just doesn't believe me. And I just double up, and then I'm there, and that's I'm simplifying it, but a lot of it is that approach to that, like you said, that 90-10 rule. So I wanted to transition, because this is something I get asked a ton as well. People seem to do very well in tournaments in the early stages or like the mid stages. I feel like people have a general idea of what to do early on. They're looking for those asymmetric risk rewards where they're in there with suited connectors or mid pairs trying to flop sets and bust people. They're just patient. They're just getting there to the tournament, so they're not feeling that pressure. They're not bored yet. They're like, I'm comfortable, But then as the tournament goes on and you get to those mid stages, sometimes people get below average, the blinds move up, every blind level now suddenly becomes significant relative to your stack to pot ratio. And I feel like a lot of people struggle with going through those mid stages, and then next thing you know, they're short and they bust. Or they struggle getting from the mid stages to the late stages to the final table. What adjustments did you make there to not rely so much on luck in progressing through those mid stages of the tournament?
So the mid stages are really, I think, one of the hardest to navigate stages of a tournament, and this is one of the things that a lot of people kind of feel like they struggle with. And I tried so many things over the time and over the years, but the one thing that I have found that has worked most for me, because when you're in a mid stage of a tournament, you're gonna have these spots where someone is shoving with 16 big blinds or 20 big blinds that you have to call, right? And they're not all gonna go in your favor. So the way I kind of told myself is, okay, Joseph, you're gonna make sure that in the middle stages of a tournament, you're going to be equipped with enough of a large stack to be able to play 2 pots for 20 big blinds each and still have 10 or 15 big blinds for yourself. So my goal has always been 50 to 55 big blinds as we're nearing the middle stages of a tournament, because if I need to lose 2 pots for 20 big blinds each, I'm still able to compete. So when that happens, because it fucking happens, you lose that 20 big blind flip, or one that you're even ahead, you're okay to take another one, and if you take that second one, you're okay to still compete for your third one. So the element of luck in tournament poker is always going to be there with the flips, and when you get to middle stages and blinds become that much shorter, that's always going to be there. But the best way to kind of give yourself the best chance is to be able to do that as frequently as possible. And if you're not able to win those 2 favorable spots that you get yourself into in a 20 big blind stack of shoves 3 times, then it's not your tournament for the day. So you just you pack that up, you take it, and then you move on with it. But yeah, I think just trying to cruise through it with an equal size stack would be the best way. And the best way to do that is to accumulate early on. The thing to do early on is aggression. That is just I can't stress on that enough, because when you start early in a tournament, people are still settling in. They're still trying to identify each other, trying to figure out who plays how. They're not still yet ready or warmed up. So a warm-up routine in a tournament is so essential. I do things like just jump on a few simulators and make sure that first hand that I'm playing in that tournament is not actually my first hand of the day. I'm ready to put you in for your stack. It's not too early for me. I'm not thinking, oh, it's the first hand of the tournament, I'm going to take it a bit easier. So you just there are early on in the tournament. To me, I find contrary to what people think, even though the blinds are a bit smaller, but you can accumulate so many medium-sized wins or small to medium-sized wins. They accumulate a stack that is going to allow you to have that strategy that once you are nearing to the middle stages of a tournament, you're able to, compete for, 15, 20 big blind shoves and hope that you hold up 1 out of 3 times and still be able to compete for the later stages.
That's so great. There's so many good nuggets here. And I think just seeing your macro plan of having a plan that's like cohesive from the beginning of the tournament, starts before the tournament. It starts with your pregame routine, your warm-up routine, hit the ground running when the tournament starts, knowing that by midnight or by day 2, or depending on how long the tournament is, I want to be at this point at this time. And so I have to create a plan that's going to get me there so that when the inevitable comes, it's like building in a cushion for the luck, just like the house does. They handle luck because they have lots of bets, and they could withstand the luck in the short term because they're betting many times and can reach the long term. In tournaments, you can't do it 1,000 times. You're not going to have 1,000 big blinds to handle all the 20 big blind shoves, but you can do it as many times as you can. And like you said, 55 is a great number because you're going to play these 10, 15, 20, conservatively 20 on the big side all in, 20 big blind all ins. And if you can plan for 2.5, 3 of those, you can really reduce your variance because it's, a lot less likely you're going to lose 3 in a row than 1 or 2. And if, like you said, if you do, it's not your tournament, but you're doubling or tripling your odds of progressing. And I think it's really smart to start early. And like, if you look at athletes, they don't get to the race and run a mile without already having broken a sweat. By the time they're running the race, they might have already ran a mile or 2 before they even run a mile for the race because they're warmed up. Swimmers do this as well. They swim 100 meters, but they swam 600 meters or 800 meters to prepare for the 100 that they're gonna swim in the race. It's the same in poker, and people are so exploitable early on. Frankly, it's probably so much easier because nobody wants to bust early. Nobody wants to play big pots early. Nobody wants to take even plus EV risks early because they just don't want to take any risk. So even people with, for example, I mean, most of the time, you guys know this, you wind up on the river, you know, at best you have top pair, like 90% of the time or more. Like if you have top pair on the river, it's very good. It's hard to have top pair on the river. But even with top pair, people don't want to play a big pot with top pair on the river. So 90% of the time, that's what they have. I'm simplifying. And they don't want to play a big pot. So it's just easy to push people off hands in certain spots when favorable cards come to your range relative to theirs, and timing your double barrel bluffs with your sizing, and really pushing people off hands and just taking down small, medium-sized pots. You're chipping away. You're building up your stack. You're sort of establishing this image where people don't want to play pots with you, making it easier to win hands later on in the event as well when the stacks get more significant, and just really compounds. And then, you know, you do lower your variance in those in the later stages of the tournaments when you can withstand these. I remember one time I was all in an event, my first event in the Bahamas, and I was against Johnny Bax, Cliff Josephy, and he was like a legend back in the day too. So he was like the biggest winner online at the time. And I was complaining that I got it all in and lost against him because like, oh, I never win my flips, or maybe it was like I was 2-1 where he had one overcard and I had a pair, something like that. And he said, you know, maybe you got unlucky this hand, but it's your fault you didn't have more chips so that when you got unlucky, you can still be in the tournament. And that was the lesson for me. I was like, it's just first of all, he had a totally different mindset. I was blaming external circumstance and he was focused on what he can control. And he's sitting there with a pile of chips, you know, the biggest one, I think he was the #1 tournament player in the world at the time. It just made so much sense to me. He was thinking about the tournament in a completely different way than I had ever approached it. And he was ready for these all-in situations, whether he won or lost. Such good advice, man. Great stuff. Thank you for that.
No problems.
All right, cool. I appreciate the time here. I know there's so much more we can unpack, but we're going to have to do another episode. So any parting words?
No.
People looking to make poker?
Yeah. I've been asked by my partner if I would ever teach my son how to play poker, and I still don't know what the answer is. But it's a very long journey. The one thing that I did tell my parents is, if I took the journey of becoming a doctor or an engineer, that would have been a 10-year educational period with a lot of money spent. And then, a lot of, sort of at work experience for me to become that doctor engineer. So, same thing with poker. If you're trying to make poker a craft, or if you're thinking at making poker a craft, don't think it's going to be overnight. The good thing is there's people like Alec who can, take that journey of 10 years for you into a compounded, depending on how much time you're willing to spend into it, but you can compound and shorten that period into a lot less time. But there's going to be a lot of frustration. There's going to be a lot of, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to feel like, we've all said it, right? I never win my flips. Then who the fuck wins the flips if we all don't win them? I don't understand. So, you're just going to feel like you're unlucky. The world's against you. You're going to feel like a victim. It's just going to be unenjoyable for a while, but, it's a really good lifestyle. It's a great thing to do. And there's great people like Alec who can actually take that journey from 10 years into a compounded, however period of time to make you get to that point. But you just got to make sure that you trust the strategy, build one that works, trust it, and then just implement it and stick with it.
Thank you so much. We'll leave it there. Joseph, really appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you, man.